Hey there everyone, welcome to Transcend Reality. My name is Andrew Chirieleison.
And my name is Samir.
Do you want to learn about what makes some of the best performers in the world reach that level? Lucky for you, you're at the right place.
Here at Transcend Reality, our objective is to spark discussions centered around meaningful ideas so that you can leave feeling empowered to make progress in your life.
What matters about who Samir and I are
is that we are students of life. Transcend Reality is all about taking yesterday's reality, which we accepted,
and finding new ways to transcend yesterday's reality for a better tomorrow.
We're on a quest to find the best, world-class ideas, mindsets, and ways of life through our unique perspectives and insights.
And through conversations and interviews with shapers and framers around the world.
Our modern world is seeing such a stark divide between the people who have created massive amounts of value in our world, which has been financially successful.
From billionaires, celebrities, you get the point.
And the people who have the potential to reach that level of societal value. We want you, whoever you are and wherever you are, to gain insight into what it takes to lead a life well lived.
Because it's our belief that by creating a bridge to reach a meaningful idea or concept,
we hold the power to shape the world for a better tomorrow. Let's transcend reality as we know it, together.
All right, 3, 2, 1, and we're live. All right, Mr. Parixit Davé serves as the Director of Emerging Technologies at Columbia University.
As a senior leader, Mr. Davé is tasked with the executive team to design and implement innovative emerging technology projects across Columbia University. As the co-founder of the Emerging Technologies Consortium, his responsibilities include fostering an environment where Columbia individuals can learn about what technology is changing the world by inviting industry partners such as Apple, Google, and HP, to name a few, and by highlighting work done at Columbia University.
And on top of all of that, Mr. Davé attended Rutgers University, where he studied information technology and later earned an MBA in strategy and leadership. So, off the bat, it sounds like you have some impressive stuff under your belt. So I just want to ask, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I had a packed day, a bunch of meetings.
I can imagine.
So I'm looking forward to speaking with the both of you.
Yeah.
It's a Friday, and I still have one more meeting left to go. But I always say my meetings are exciting. We're thinking about technology, about people, about higher education, and how to really support the community at Columbia, but also share knowledge with our peers and other institutions and globally as well, since we are a global research institution.
Well, thank you for carving out some time for us.
No worries. I'm excited about this. This is the fun part of my day.
I'm glad you look at it that way. So, I want to ask you, Mr. Davé, that what is your life story for Andrew, myself, and for our audience?
Yeah, how about I'll start with present and then sort of work the way back. So I direct emerging technologies at Columbia University, and one of the main goals is working with faculty and researchers on emerging tech. And so if we say, okay, what is emerging tech, right? Some of the focus areas that we are looking at right now are augmented and virtual reality, or they call it now even extended reality, right? It includes 3D printing, 3D scanning. And also we are looking at machine learning and AI, right? So how do we break down the barriers and improve research? How do we think about next generation teaching and learning? So students who are coming to Columbia campus, right? How can we leverage and utilize some of this next generation tech so they can learn more efficiently and effectively? Really, it started a couple of years ago where, I went to a conference, and I believe Case Western had presented. They were partnering with Microsoft in looking at anatomy, teaching anatomy with augmented reality. So if we sort of define the baseline of what virtual and augmented reality is, we can think of it this way. Virtual reality is you put on a headset, much like something like this.
Oh, wow.
This is the Oculus Quest 2. It just came out
Uh-huh.
a couple of months ago. You put that on, and the world as you know it disappears, right? If I put on that Quest, I could be in my office. The next minute, I could be transported to Paris, right? I could experience visually in an immersive setting the city, the lights, the sound, right? We're not there with smell yet, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
at least the sights, the sound, and you have haptic feedbacks
Wow.
with these controllers, right? So you can um, you can almost feel certain things, but it's still very crude right now, right?
Right.
And with augmented reality is you put a headset on and you have a clear visor and your world is augmented. So I could be looking at you, but I could see data points or I could see other graphics
Wow.
coming into my purview, right? If you even put it into a context of, let's say you're a trader and you have all these screens that are virtual that are coming up. So instead of them being physical, real screens, they're all virtual, and you can
Wow.
move data
Wow.
points around in this space, right? Or think
That's
of
huge.
yourself as a surgeon, and you're performing surgery, and you can overlay an MRI image on your patient's actual body, right? An
Wow.
actual MRI, or think of it as if you are training to do surgery. That's really high precision surgery, and you can actually practice on your subject as if you were going in to perform the actual surgery. And even now, we can have these instruments that are of fine precision. We can recreate them. So you could be holding up a syringe or a knife or a
Wow.
really specific instrument that you use for surgery, and you could recreate that, right? So you could train and actually perform a surgery virtually, right?
It's
Wow.
So
incredible.
these are some of the things that the team works on. Some of the technologies that we bring into Columbia. And then you also have right. There's a whole creative machines lab at Columbia looking at AI and machine learning and what that means for not just robotics, right? But what that means for the future of work. At some point in the not so distant future, the both of you are going to be graduating college,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going out, looking at looking at the real world and getting into hopefully some great careers, right? So, how are these technologies going to affect uh, those, or even or create new careers that we don't even envision yet, right? So
Definitely.
that allows the students to have this safe space or a sandbox to play around with these technologies while they're at Columbia. And so my CIO tells me you have the best job. It's like the most fun, right? You get to think about not what's going to happen in the future, but really you have a great team and you have the support to make it happen today.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's
that's my
huge.
role currently at Columbia. But there's also another side to that, right? There's the community building side of that. It's when we started up, we saw this challenge of there's faculty members who want to start experimenting with some of these technologies, but it's very difficult, right? And I put them into these three buckets. There's faculty members at Columbia that are aware of some of these technologies, but they don't understand how to implement them, or they don't understand the technology behind them,
Sure.
right? And then we have an esteemed faculty member and researcher named Steve Feiner. He's been researching AR VR for the past 30 years, right? Some
Wow.
of the work that his lab has done at Columbia has been truly groundbreaking, right?
Incredible. Yeah.
In all industries. And so his lab is just amazing. If your folks are visiting Columbia, and you ever get a chance to, see a couple of labs, visit Steve Feiner's lab because it's literally it feels like you're time traveling into the future, right?
Wow.
Because some of the not only the tech that they have there, but the people that are working there are some of the brightest minds you'll meet. But then there's another set of faculty who have been teaching a certain way for the past 20, 30, 40 years, and they have no idea that this technology even exists, right?
Yeah,
And so what you
yeah.
want to do is you want to put on your like entrepreneur hat, right? And you want to say, how do we bring these people together? And how do we break down the walls? And because Columbia is very decentralized, you know, when people think of Columbia, they think of this traditional monolithic institution, and it's far from it. We have 17 different schools at Columbia, and each of them have their own culture, right? And so there could be a case where there's two researchers who are doing research in the same building, and they may not be aware of each other's research. And so if you start creating this community and bringing people together, you start getting your champions, right? So the people that are interested in, they're like, hey, get me this technology. Let me start playing with it. Help me with it. They start talking, and the researcher or the faculty member who's been teaching the same way for the past 20 to 30, 40 years, their ears start perking up and saying, what is my colleague doing down the hall that is really cool, right? Like his students are eager and they're engaged, and they're excited about this, and they're publishing, and they are showing that this, you know, their tech is improving, let's say, test scores by 20%, right? Or it's improving engagement by a certain percentage. I mean, now we have metrics, and we can quantify, okay, does this technology actually improve X, right? Or is it simply hype at this point? So you want to put the rigors, right? And you want to sort of kick the tires of the tech as well. You just don't want to use it because it's novel, right? Or you think it's the next big thing, or because you want to make sure it's not just hype.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you do thorough due diligence on the tech as well. So the other role that I play is that community engagement, right? And building this partnership at Columbia of faculty, of students, of researchers, and of administration. But you also have to, there's another key component of working with the industry, right? And so when you said that we worked with Apple, Google, NVIDIA, Intel, HP, right? We are bringing the industry to campus because there's this dual information flow. It goes in and it goes out as well.
Right.
When they come to campus, not only do they learn about Columbia and they learn about the research that's happening here, but we learn about the cool tech that's happening in these different organizations or corporations, right?
For sure.
Right.
And so that is key, because then we are, as the institution itself, is not stuck in a silo.
Sure.
Right. We get to see and we get to understand what's happening beyond our borders as well.
Awesome.
Incredible. I mean, honestly, you should start like a side hustle as like a salesman for this. You got me sold on it. Yeah. No.
So I, and going further back, I've been in higher education for the past 20 years. Before Columbia, I was at Rutgers University, and I did everything from software development, being a systems engineer, to actually leading development teams and technical teams. And then, I was also had the opportunity to not only do my undergraduate work there, but also do my MBA. And looking further back, I had a very non-traditional path, right? And it's it's the story isn't that much different, but it's not sort of the traditional story that we all hear about. And being a first generation immigrant, right? My parents came here with very little money. They worked really hard. They didn't have contacts, money, or power, right? But what they taught me was grit, resilience, right? The ability to think quickly on my feet, because I don't always have these resources, right? And if just looking at my father's story, he came here, he worked 2 jobs and went to school at night, right? And he was in the computer industry as well. He worked with mainframes, and there's this huge mainframe called AS400s, and that did a lot of batch processing for big corporations, right? And so my first experience with technology and computers, I want to say I was probably 9 or 10, right?
Okay.
We got this huge IBM X 386, and it was like the size of a desk at this point, right?
Wow.
It had like
Wow.
probably 64 kilobits of memory or kilobytes of memory or something really small. But the reason why I gravitated towards that was, I learned how to program, and the language I learned first was something called BASIC, right? And it allowed you to create your own world, right, outside of the world you currently lived in, right? I mean, there was a lot of struggle growing up just because we didn't have, financial resources,
Sure. Yeah.
and so in dealing with all of that, and then also I was the youngest out of 4 siblings, right? And they were much older than me. And so I was kind of like the black sheep of the family. Like, they were doing their own things, and people just sort of left me alone, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I went, my world was something. When I was programming, I could create whatever I wanted to, right? And so whatever, everyone has obstacles and struggles they're facing, right? It was a way for me to escape that and create my own reality.
Wow.
And even though I didn't have the power or the money or the status in the real world, right? In this virtual world, it didn't matter. If I knew how to program, I could create whatever I wanted to, right? And just having that mentality. And also, when you think about writing program, there's so many constraints, right? You're constrained by the actual physical memory and the hardware that you have. And
Sure. Yeah.
so it's sort of like with this dichotomy of my real life, I had these constraints, and also in my virtual life where I was learning, I had these constraints, and I learned how to work through those constraints, right? And so it was truly like, it's still, I find fascinating where if you have that ability, you could create, right, a better world, or you can create products, you can create services that don't exist. And if you look at sort of the history of that, that's exactly what has happened. Think about the year you both of you were born, right? Were you born early 2000s, right?
2002, yeah.
Yeah. 03
2002,
for
right?
me.
The iPod was released in 2001. Like, your world is completely digital. Think about all the products and services that have been built by people that just simply understood how to write code, right? And understood how to manipulate ones and zeros. And now they're billion-dollar tech companies that are literally, you're entrenched in their software, in their hardware, right? Like, this is like with me all. I feel like if I leave this at home, my whole life falls apart, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Think
can
about all
relate
of
to
the
that.
apps that are on there that were built, right? I mean, and think about that. I mean, think about the way business has completely been transformed by this digital age that we live in, right? And so, this could very well be the next form of compute. Imagine
Yeah.
when this starts to get more smaller, right? Gets more powerful. Could you imagine? I mean, and so it's not a physics problem where you could potentially have contacts that have compute built in that you put in, and your world is augmented, right? So instead of opening up your phone and pulling up an app, it's sitting right in front of you,
Wow.
right? Think about the possibilities and the opportunities, right? You have to think of this as a surgeon thinks of a knife, right? Yes, he's opening up a patient, but he's eventually doing good. Yet you can have someone use a knife and kill someone, right? So the way I view tech, I can, there are two sides of that coin, right? There's the side that you could use tech to manipulate, to hack, right, and do things that will probably land you in jail. But then there's also ways to empower people, right? So if you're an opportunist, or if you are someone who is entrepreneurial, you have to have that viewpoint of, how do I use technology as a competitive advantage, right? And think about your peers and the marketplace. They're digital, right?
Yeah.
How do you communicate to them? It's not a traditional way of just putting out ads in a newspaper or traditional marketing, right? On TV or something. You have to be sophisticated to know where your audience is, know what they want, and build that, right? And market to them. So
Definitely, yeah.
and I know we're going on this other tangent as well now.
It's all good.
That's okay, yeah.
But
We have a lot of good
those,
stuff.
if you could build and if you could sell, you will change the world. And history shows us that, right? If you look at all of the sort of companies that were built up, that were digital, that embraced that, they completely uprooted traditional systems and changed people's lives.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Irrespective of how you feel about that company, right? They've completely changed lives. And from every aspect of business, of the way we're living, even if we think about farming and agriculture, right? Like the technology has completely changed the way industries work and the way business runs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I was always fascinated with that sort of thinking of having this sort of technical expertise. You could change the world, and I was fascinated by that, right? And so my first job was actually in the video game industry. And this was the late 90s. I was about 18 years old. I also loved music and playing in bands, right?
Okay.
So and I always felt like writing code and programming was the same as writing music. It was all pattern recognition for me, and it was all pattern based for me, right? So when I think about music, my brain works in patterns, right? And when I write code, same way. But there's this sense of like, music can be elegant, it can be beautiful, it can be simple. That's the way I view my sort of, when I write code, the same exact way, right? It can be simple, it can be beautiful, it can be elegant. You're sort of utilizing the resources and the constraints you have in a manner that you don't need thousands of lines of code to do something. You did it in 100 lines of code. Like that's beautiful for me, right? And so when I was in this band, and my bandmate, I was very lucky. He was a developer, a computer programmer at Bell Labs in Murray Hill. So if you're familiar with Bell Labs, there's actually a really good book written about them called the Idea Factory, right? And
Okay, yeah.
the culture at Bell Labs at that time was, the engineers rule, right? Give them this space where they could really think of crazy ideas. And so the Unix operating system was built and founded there. They discovered the cosmic background radiation, if you're familiar with like the Big Bang, and right. And so they were not only discovering, but the culture was primed, where they really let their engineers dream and execute, and they sort of left them alone. And so he was a programmer, and part of our band practice was writing music. The other part was talking about tech, right? And like we would talk about just like what the world would look like. We would talk. Then this was talk about the internet and what that means to the world. And he had a friend working in the video game industry, and he was always talking about like what the methods he were using to program their characters and how video game development were working. And I was really fascinated by it. And I was 18, and once again, I didn't go the traditional 4-year college route. I went to a county college, right?
Okay.
So and that it was because, I didn't have the funds to support or myself through 4 years of, taking out loans and then figuring out, okay, now I have a
Sure.
degree, I'm $100,000 in debt. How am I going to pay that off? Right. Like that was really daunting to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I was doing computer science. I just finished my like second semester, and I was talking to one of my bandmates' friend, and he was like, "Hey, we have an opening for a junior developer." And the opportunity came, and I was like, I'll do it. If there's an opportunity, if there's an interview, I took it, right? And
Yeah.
so I remember I was actually working at the Gap at the time. But across from the Gap, there was a Walden bookstores. They don't even exist anymore. And so during my lunch breaks, I would go and I would read books on, like, they were using C++ in the video games, right? So I would read about video game development and design. And during my lunch breaks, I would read like crazy.
Wow.
And then every opportunity I had gotten before that interview, I would just go to Walden Books, even after work, and just read. And
Wow.
so during the interview, it felt very natural. Like I knew the process, uh, especially speaking with that friend and just reading about it. I got the job.
Nice. Yeah.
So I was 18, going to community college, but now I was in the video game industry, right? I mean, I started out making, at that point, what the Gap was paying me $5 an hour to $50,000 a year.
Jeez.
Right?
Wow.
At 18.
At 18, yeah,
At
that's pretty
18.
good.
For me, I was like, holy shit, I'm rich.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
little bit, like, especially coming from a family, where we didn't have money. $50,000 was a lot of money for an 18-year-old, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so
High
I was like,
roller.
yeah, for like my sort of ignorant, naive mind, right, at that point was like, I am rich. This is great. I'm in the video game industry. And, it was great. I've learned
Yeah.
so much from working there. But I also learned about what I liked and what I didn't like, right? And
Sure.
so marketing, so PR would create these crazy deadlines. Like, we're going to release 15 titles or games, right, this
Mhm.
quarter.
Wow.
And so that was like, oh my God, like that's a lot. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot of work. And so, being 18 and being in that environment, there was the turnover rate was huge. People, like, you see developers go in and out. And so
Wow.
I did
Yeah.
it for about 3 or 4 years, and then I got burnt out.
Gotcha.
Right. So it was like, I rarely got to see my friends. Work was really tough, right? There was a lot of pressure, and being that young, and kind of also insecure because I didn't have the formal training as everyone else
Right.
did, and so I really had to learn on my feet. But looking back at it, it was the best decision I have made, right? Because that was sort of the catalyst of, like, I could do this. I could, even though I didn't have the formal education, right? If given the opportunity, I could succeed. And I lasted, 4 years. I remember going into the office, and that day I wanted to quit. The director was like, "What do you want? I'll give you 20 grand. Just stay on my team," right? Like, I'll give you a bonus. I was like, it's not the money. It's just, I'm young. Like, my peers are, going off to college, and, or some are almost a year away from graduating. And he first just threw money at me, right? Thinking like, this kid's young. I'll throw him, like, I'll throw him a bonus, and, like, this will make him stay. But, I did a lot of soul searching, and I was like, maybe I should look at going back to school because I didn't have that degree, right? Or I didn't have that formal education. And at that point, it made me feel, a bit insecure in that space.
Right. Right.
But looking back at it, and people tell you, it's like, you know what, you learned so much more in those 4 years, and if you'd probably learn if you were in college doing any technical degree, because you were doing it day in, day out. And then you also you also think about how to function as a team and how to work with other people as well, right? So that was huge for me. But I took some time off, right? I traveled. Now that I had some nice cushy savings that afforded me those abilities. I bought like music. I bought guitars. I bought some musical instruments I probably couldn't afford before. But then I got bored, right? Like my mind is like, if I'm not doing something, I get bored easily. And so I remember just looking at a job opportunity at Rutgers University. And it's funny because I was thinking of applying, right, to go to Rutgers. And I saw a job opportunity. I was like, hey, they're looking for a developer. Because what was happening at that point was they were transitioning their contract system or their application system from pen and paper to online, meaning when you applied for colleges back in the day, it wasn't online.
There's no online portal.
There was no online application back then, right? So you filled out a physical, like you got this booklet, right? Wow. The colleges sent out this booklet, and part of that packet was information about the university and then the applications, right, that students need to fill out. And every university did this. And so I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. Like, I could see the powers of the internet and how I'm like, yeah, you should be going online and filling out your application, not getting this huge packet. Right. So think about how much resources you're wasting in not only creating this packet, right, printing this packet, the people that are shipping this packet. And then when you get that packet back, the people that have to open those packets up, read through those applications.
A lot of time.
Right? It's just a lot of time. So my first job at Rutgers was writing this online application system. And I was a team of one. Okay?
Jeez. One.
Team of one. So, higher education, A, is very risk averse, right? And B, we're a state university. We don't have the resources to hire a team to even think about, okay, how do we progress to paper contracts to online? And you still have a lot of the university administration thinking this is going to fail. Who wants to go online?
What year is this?
This was 2001, 2002.
Okay, 2001.
The year you were born, right? So, but these people have been doing this for decades, right?
Right.
Yeah.
This actually, if you think about it, if you put yourself in their shoes, they're kind of offended that now a potential student can simply go online, look at the website, and fill out an application. Well, what about me? Right? If you think about the sort of the human instinct, they feel threatened, right?
Sure.
Now some kid, and I was 22, is going to come in and replace us.
Wow.
Right? So I also had that battle, right? Because I met with the administrative staff, and you can sort of feel that they were thinking that this is not going to work. Who wants to go online, look at the material and fill out a contract? But in my mind, I'm like, you guys are crazy. Who wants to fill this out and
right.
pen and paper, right? I saw that opportunity, but like my job was an uphill battle because I had to figure out the infrastructure, right? So meaning usually you have a team where somebody is the database administrator, the infrastructure engineer that builds out the infrastructure for you to write your application. As a developer, you're just writing code. And even that, are you writing front-end code? Meaning, are you writing the code when you open up a browser, right? And when you go to Twitter, for example, there's a front-end engineer and there's a front-end designer that designs it. And the front-end engineer is the one that engineers the usability But then there's a back-end engineer, right?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
glue that takes what the front-end engineer is doing and communicates that to the application server, the web server, and the database. And the back-end engineer makes all of that happen. So when you click on something or when you tweet something, it's a team, and all of those contributions are making your tweet go out to the internet or go out to the world, right?
Wow.
I was that one person doing everything,
Jeez.
right? And at first,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is insane, right? But looking back at it, I learned all of those skill sets, right? And you want to talk about failure, right? So the administrative staff were like, yeah, we're lucky if we get 5% traffic, meaning out of all of the packets that they get sent out, right? Let's say 5% of folks actually use the online application. And so I'm like, okay, I'll bump up my server to accept 20% of traffic, right? That first year, half of the students use the online application. Day one, my application crashes.
Crash.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Right. And so, and I knew, I'm like, I should not be listening to these people. Like, I should bump up these server specs and I should build out this server. So at least we get, half to 60, 70%. Right.
Yeah.
And so even that failure, what it gave me was a confidence of, yeah, your background and what listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Because what I was hearing was from people that were completely detached from my world, right? And they were like, and they were, but in their view, this is not going to work at all, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when senior leadership saw that we had more than half of students filling this out, right? And then they were like, wow, like this is going to be the future, right? It took a while for them to realize that, but that was inevitable. This is going to happen. So either we retrain or repurpose the staff, because a lot of the staff were doing work where like they were opening the packets and they were making
wow.
sure that what the data that we needed from the students, like we may ask for XYZ from a student, like all that was there. And then it gets handed off to another department that reviews it, right? That checks the application. And then it goes to admissions, right? So then they review it. So if Samir applies for Rutgers, right, they're reviewing the application. They're reviewing, there's a whole matrix that's there that admissions uses. And then somebody stamps it and says, okay, Samir, you're accepted, right? And so that was the workflow. So now the new workflow was you go online, you fill out this application. That application gets already inputted into a database that's completely searchable, right? That's actionable, meaning that now the reviewer can look through an application simply with their mouse, and there's 2 buttons, right? Accept, deny, and that's it, right? So you've taken that whole workflow or that whole process down to now it's super simple. There isn't this need of doing all these checks and balances because everything was electronics. You can upload all your documents, right, to the application. And so that whole workflow changes. And so now you have to think about, okay, we have to pivot. The people that were doing XYZ, and what's good, the good thing about the higher education industry is, yeah, we don't need to lay them off. What other higher purpose or higher thinking can they be doing as well, right? So you retrain them. You can augment their skills. And so that was my first foray into being in higher education, and then I loved it. Like I got to work with and meet some of the brightest minds. I love the whole research landscape of, okay, let's push the envelope of some of these technologies or of some of these theories, right? So you get to really push the envelope as well. But then you also have this work-life balance, right? I wasn't in the office until 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night every day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I could do, like, people are multifaceted. You know, people aren't just about their work, right? Like, you know, I was into my music. I was into like reading and traveling, and so it afforded me the time to do that as well. And that is
awesome.
really
Yeah.
important, right? You want to make sure that you are a well-rounded person, right? And not just sort of tunnel visioned.
Yeah.
And so I still got to do my band, right? I still got to go on tour. I still got to do these things and travel that I wanted to do. And I was still learning. By that point, I also was an undergraduate student at
Wow.
Rutgers. So my tuition was completely paid for. So, right. So since I was an
pretty
employee.
good deal, yeah.
Yeah. Since I was an employee, okay, I wasn't making the same amount of money at that point that I was making as a video game developer, but it was still really good. I think, I took like a 20%, pay cut. But what I was getting was the tuition remission, right? Was
Yeah.
the work-life balance, was the ability to work with really smart people and push myself. And I was still able to continue my studies and go to school and work, right? Because that was something that I needed. I couldn't just do either or just because of my situation. I had to
Right.
still work. And so that was the best of both worlds. And so there was a lot of cool initiatives that I was able to work on at Rutgers. I went on to do my MBA, and that was the other thing. I had a very technical background, but I didn't have the finance or the marketing, or even the ability to sell your ideas, right, in a way
Yeah.
that inspires other people, right? So as you sort of move up the corporate ladder or even the work ladder, right, you need to have these skill sets of, okay, you may have great ideas. How do you communicate that to other people, right?
Absolutely.
And so having those technical skill sets are really good, and also having these other skill sets where you understand marketing, finance, business are important as well. And
Right.
so I always felt that I didn't want to just do another master degree in a technical field. I wanted to also step out of my comfort zone, right, and do
Yeah.
something where it was new to me as well.
Incredible.
That's awesome. There's a lot to unpack there.
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
Okay.
that's an amazing.
I will stop talking because I know
No,
I spoke a lot.
No, but we
I mean, that was
appreciate it. And you
incredible.
touched
Yeah.
on so much of the stuff that we like to talk about, whether that's surrounding yourself with the right people or being, you mentioned grit and resilience. And so you touched all of that in your life story, and we appreciate you're sharing that with us.
Yeah. I mean, your whole life is literally transcending yesterday's reality, which is amazing.
No, I mean, emerging technology. It is cool that we have this opportunity to speak with you. And you talk about, you said there's two sides of it. Like, there's people who are kind of concerned about how fast technology is developing, and then there's like the side that you see it from, and there's this opportunity out there.
Yes.
And you mentioned how it's starting to come into the classroom. And so I wanted to ask you, because you are in emerging technology, like, how far off are we from, VR being, or virtual reality being, in even high school classrooms and stuff like that?
It's actually happening now. There's programs where they're introducing VR learning into high school, but it's happening at a smaller scale, and I'll tell you why. Right, the most important issue is content development. Right, so what I mean by that is, it's not really this hardware that's an issue. Like right now, this Oculus Quest, right? You don't even need a high-powered computer. It's completely wireless. It's plug and play. But it's okay. Who's going to develop the software or the application? And that is very difficult. Like, there's this hurdle right now. And I always the analogy that I give is in the music world. Back in the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, in order for a musician to record music, you had to go into a proper studio.
Right.
Right. And so you go to a recording studio, there's an engineer, there's a producer, there's a technician that will plug in all your guitars and work like the music board. Compare that to right now, you can make music on a laptop and distribute it to millions of people around the world.
Right.
Right. So you don't need to go into a proper studio. You have all of the compute power built into your laptop. All you need is your guitar, your keyboard, and an audio interface and a digital audio workstation, or a DAW, as musicians call it.
Right.
And you can make music. And then you have this platform, right? You have Spotify, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have all these platforms where you can talk about your music and advertise your music and find a whole new fan base. You know, right? You just don't have to be putting up flyers like in the old days.
Right.
Like we would put up flyers, we would go to clubs and say, hey, can we play? Now you can just send them a link to your Spotify, right? Or your Apple Music, and they can hear it and they can book you, right? Like all of that is completely changed. And so this world right now is very hard to create that experience. And so there are, you know, that's an opportunity, right?
Right.
There are companies that are looking to simplify that, but right now you need a 3D modeler, right? You need a design, you need an environment designer, you need a developer, right? You need specialized people that understand immersive experiences and how to create and script that out. And so, and that's capital intensive with not only humans and hiring people, but also with having the funding and the money. So once that gets easier and these things get smaller, and they will, right? You're going to have this sort of hype burst of, wow, this technology is ready for prime time.
Right. Right.
And if you couple that with, and this is really thinking far, maybe like 5 years or 10 years into the future with AI, right? So right now there's something called language transformers, right? And there's something called GPT-3. And what that does is it's basically a machine learning library where it's learning by looking at documents, right? Scouring the web and making its own inferences about the world, right?
Okay.
So let's say you feed this machine learning model thousands of legal documents, and then you have a lawyer provide insight into that machine learning model, right? So once that machine learning model learns, right, or understands legal documents, Andrew, you can say, okay, here's an NDA, right? Teach me as if I was in the second grade what this document means.
Wow.
And that model will actually teach you or describe to you what this document is as if you were in the second grade.
And you say that's like 5, 10 years away?
No, this is now, right? So this is now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now I'm making the connection. Imagine teaching machines.
Right.
Let's say you put on, this gets smaller and this gets more powerful. You put on glasses, right? And you have a teacher in front of you teaching you biochemistry, teaching you the arts, teaching you physics, right?
Wow.
Teaching you astrobiology, whatever, right?
Yeah,
and it's always keeping track of where you are, right? So let's say you have a class of 30 people, right? Or let's think of higher education. You have a class of 200 people.
Okay.
You have a faculty member or a professor who's up there teaching, and then you have a bunch of TAs, right?
Yeah.
All the classroom or the students are at different points of learning in time. So Samir, you may understand, and I'm picking, let's say chemistry. You may understand the basics of chemistry, but Andrew and I are struggling with it, right?
Right.
But the class is going to move forward. I may have to go to the TA. We may have to do some tutoring. But think about VR, right? And think about AI when it's connected with AI. That virtual faculty member that I have, I can put this headset on at any time of the day that will give me feedback, that will understand what I am learning and what I'm not learning, and give me examples and teach me what I'm not learning, as opposed to if I was in a real, let's say, auditorium, right? I'm just sort of getting kind of left behind because the class
Right.
needs to move forward.
For
So
sure.
where, and we are really going on a tangent, but where I really see education is, let's say we learn these core capabilities digitally or virtually, but
Yeah.
then we come together and apply them with applied projects, right? So you can think of higher education transforming into, okay, we spend the first week learning these core capabilities,
Right.
and then we come back and we do a project where we're applying what we learned. And now the faculty member is doing a higher level work or thinking or teaching, right?
For
It's
sure.
not just teaching you the basics of biology or chemistry or computer science or whatever, right? And now you're coming in as a group and you have those core capabilities because this virtual teacher has been teaching you and
Right.
tracking you and feeding all of that to the professor who knows exactly what Samir is getting and not getting and what Andrew is getting and not getting. But he also sees the grander view of what the class is getting and not getting.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'll take it a step further. This AI agent is learning and building new content on the fly, right? So the faculty member doesn't have to go back and say, oh, I need to create content around cell biology because half of the class is not getting it.
Uh-huh.
Right.
No, the AI agent needs to be smart enough to say, okay, I need to build new content because
Wow.
half the class is not understanding cell biology.
Jeez. It's
That's
crazy to think. I
fascinating.
mean, you said the iPod came out in 2001,
Yeah.
and how much technology in 20 years in the grand scheme of time is very, very short.
Yes.
And how quickly we're evolving with technology.
Yes.
Do you think at any point it becomes too fast, or you might need to take a step back? Like, if that virtual reality and that AI was a part of our classroom, and that would, I mean, we could virtually learn from home in a more immersive way.
And you know what? You know what actually kicked this off, like in sort of high gear, was COVID.
Right.
Right. Think about how you are learning right now. You're learning virtually via Zoom. Like you've probably heard of this Zoom fatigue, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the drawbacks of Zoom is I could put myself on mute. I could, turn my video off. I could open up my browser and I could completely zone out.
Yeah.
I do this in meetings where I'm like, this is so boring. Like I'm like getting no value out of this, right? And like people are doing this. And I mean, if you're students and you know how to write some code, you can even write some Python code that will automatically open up Zoom and sign you on without you even having to be there, right? Like
Wow.
you didn't get that idea from me, but
Okay. I don't know that I'm capable of doing that yet, but
but somebody with those capabilities could easily do that, right?
Sure.
Wow.
And but when you're looking at virtual reality, you're forced to be present and in that moment. When I put on a headset, and let's say the three of us are in that same space, if I look away and if I walk away, there's something called spatial audio, right? So you will hear me walking away because my voice will start to get fainter, right? If I am to the left of you or to the right of you, you'll actually turn your head because you'll hear my voice is coming from this side, right? You can't mute yourself or you can't
you're in it.
turn your video off. You're in it, right? And
Wow.
yes, the graphics are still very like cartoonish and not even at the scale of a video game console, but it's going to, I guarantee you, it's going to improve, and the environments are going to be such high fidelity where it's like, wow, like it feels like we're in the simulation,
Right.
and it's just
Incredible.
a matter of time where that's going to happen.
Jeez.
For sure, yeah. I mean, all of this like talk of what's coming up in the future, of what's happening even right now, as you and Andrew were just talking about with VR, got me thinking of specifically with you, Mr. Davé, and your whole experience. That what motivates you to wake up in the morning and get out of the bed to do what you do?
To be honest, I think what motivates me is knowing that I have an impact
Right.
at what I do, right? And knowing that I'm at this point in my life and where I'm at in my career, that impact is huge, right? So, before before having an emerging technology center or even having the team that I have, this didn't exist at Columbia, right? We at scale weren't looking at emerging technology. So to back up, there was no director of emerging technology. I am the first one, right? I went to my senior leadership team and said, hey, this is important. We have to be thinking about this because it's going to be coming down the line, right? Where these technologies are not going to be emerging anymore. They're going to
Right.
be
Yeah.
there. And we want to make sure that our students can, and our faculty and our researchers can fully take advantage and utilize this in the, in their studies and in their work.
Right.
And so, knowing that I have senior leadership support, right? That if I have these crazy ideas, they support me and they let me go down this path. And those crazy ideas turn into highly impactful ideas that are impacting all of Columbia.
Right.
And, in a sense, other universities as well, because all of the Ivies talk. So there's something called Ivy Plus, where
All right.
all of the Ivies get together and we talk about, what are some of the initiatives, let's say at Columbia, that we're running that have been really impactful and that have shown that we're moving the needle on research and teaching and learning. Because as an R1 research, or as a premier R1 research institution, our main focus is research and teaching and learning, right? And so how are we moving that needle forward? How are we pushing our faculty and providing them with the tools that they need to do this groundbreaking research? How are we affecting our students and giving them the tools so when they're out and they're thinking about the future of work already when they're at Columbia?
Awesome.
And I generally love this stuff, right? Like for me, and that's one takeaway I wish on the both of you is you do things that you're passionate about and that you love, because it will never feel like work.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
Right? If you are truly excited and you see this fire burning inside you where like, hey, I'm making a difference and I love what I'm doing, it will never feel like I have to go to work. And look, we have those days, right? But most of my days I am completely excited. And I may have a couple of off days, like we're just human. Where
Yeah, definitely.
like I have to go into the office because I have this crazy meeting, right? Like
Yeah.
we all have that.
Sure.
But if you should have more days where you're pumped up and you're thrilled and you're passionate than days where you're not so excited to even wake up. Right?
For sure.
Definitely.
I want to ask you, because you are a leader in a groundbreaking field that's constantly changing. I mean, how do you stay on top of that and then because you need to also articulate that to other people and teach people that. And you mentioned how in your previous work, you learned how to work with teams, but how are you staying on top of your field?
That's a great question. I'm constantly learning every day. Like there was this notion of, okay, you do 4 years of college, university, and then let's say you go on to do your master's, and then your learning ends and you're in the workforce. Far from the case, right? You need, especially at least the role I am in, right? I have to constantly keep up, right? And the way, and this is gonna sound kind of crazy, but like Twitter helps a lot. Like there's so many communities on Twitter, right? And that are talking about this stuff. There's so many people in the industry that are on Twitter they're talking about this stuff. I mean, even YouTube helps a lot. Like information, like getting information is this day and age is so easy, so much easier than 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's full of it. You have to look for the right information and the right type of people who are presenting that information.
Right.
Yeah.
But
definitely.
we as people have access to so much information. Sometimes it's information overload, right?
Yeah.
But I have to keep on it, and I have to keep my technical skills sharp, and I have to keep my communication and my leadership skills smart, because you're absolutely right. I have to communicate that to somebody who is coming from it from a different viewpoint, right? They don't have the understanding. You sort of have to pull them up to your vision, to your view, right?
Right.
And that means taking complex technical ideas and simplifying them and communicating that to your audience, right? In a way where they're going to understand that. And that is continually learning. That process is continually evolving and failing, right? Like I may have ideas that don't go anywhere.
Yeah.
That's
of course.
part of life. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, all like on that same question of what Andrew asked you with, your work, when you're working with your team, when you're leading people, when you're working on your emerging technologies consortium, as you said, there are times when you feel really amped up and you're making progress, but then there also is that dichotomy of, you're feeling a little low, you're not getting as much progress. So what do you do to
step away?
Step away?
Step away.
Step away. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
you would take a break.
I have the luxury of where I can step away. You go. Do something else. I'm kind of lucky where in my workplace I have to do a lot of context switching, meaning I have to move from one subject to another, from one idea to another, right? And for folks that have, I say I have like intellectual ADD, where for me I thrive on that, right? For other people it may scare people because they want stability, they want what's the word? They want to have a defined process. And if you don't have a defined process, people get freaked out and people get scared because they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
For me, I thrive off of that, right? I like diving deep into the unknown and figuring things out. And where people will thrive is if they have good leadership support that supports that type of environment. People are going to thrive. And so I have to make sure that my team has that support of, we may go down this path and all hell's going to break loose and it's not going to work.
Right.
You have to pivot, right? So, and pivoting and changing your mind are the best things ever, right? If you think that, okay, I have a fixed mindset of how the world works or how something works, like you don't want to go through life like that because the world is constantly changing and evolving, right? Yeah. If you have this fluid mindset of I can pivot and I can see these opportunities and I can connect the dots and I can execute and I can bring people together, you will change the world and you will be wealthy beyond your means.
Definitely.
Wow. Appreciate that. Awesome.
I'll be keeping that in mind, taking that step back.
We want to be respectful of your time because we know you have.
Yeah, I do have a 4:00.
I wish we had more time with you, but your insight is very helpful for us as we continue to navigate our young lives through college, and
exactly.
We really appreciate your time today.
I have to say, the amount of knowledge you two have is far, 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 larger than where I was at when I was your age. Like for me, just even talking to the both of you and the work that you two are doing with even your podcast, right? Like I felt I was not there, right? Even on the financial side, right? I'm on this new kick of I want to invest in companies that I love. Like I figured that stuff out maybe 10 years ago, right? I'm sure you guys are already thinking about, okay, investments and, where do I want to put my money and what is the market, right? And what are the products and services that I love that I want to invest in, right? I didn't think about any of that stuff when I was your age, right? And so what you two are doing, kudos to the work as well. So
thank you. We really appreciate hearing that from you.
Yeah, it means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, your story is, I'm a big believer and a fan of, that the phrase of the American dream, of what it stands for. And it's not just inspirational, but it's empowering to hear stories like yours and how you rose up, not just in the conformist way, but in something totally different. Yes. So I'm really grateful that you came and talked to Andrew and myself and for our audience.
I'm happy to. This was such a pleasure.
Thank you.
It was great because it broke up my day too.
We're glad we provided some relief in there. Then we, know
Yeah.
it's a busy life you're living.
Yes, it seems like it's never ending.
Well, it's
Yeah, I can
meaningful
imagine.
work. So
Yeah, I had to say,
Exactly, yeah.
don't be afraid to sometimes jump off the diving board. Take those risks, right? You two are at a point in your life where if you have these, ideas and you're like, I don't know how I'm going to make this happen, just do it. Don't wait for a degree. Don't wait to find the right contacts. Just do it. Think about all of the tools that you have at your fingertips, right? You could go from an idea to distributing it to potentially millions of people.
right.
You got to
Yeah.
take that first step and just jump off that diving board. And right now, you two are young enough where don't play it safe. No one got
Yeah.
ahead by playing it safe. Take those risks. And I don't mean go
Right.
out and do something stupid, right? There's a difference.
No, yeah.
Yeah, of
Calculated
course.
risk. Yeah.
Yes.
Of course.
Take those calculated risks because you guys have nothing to lose at this point.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. We appreciate that.
You can always consider being our third host. You'd fit right in with us. So
Happy
again,
to help
I mean,
anytime.
Thank you.
thank you for that. And again, as Andrew was saying, we want to be respectful of your time so that you can prepare. But if there was one piece of advice that, whether it's changed your life entirely, whether it's really helped you out, what would be that piece of advice that you could share with us and the world before you go?
Wow, that's a tough one, huh?
Eh,
One piece of advice, right? And maybe this is geared towards more financial advice, but think more about wealth than being rich or having status, right? And when I say wealth, I mean, could you think of ideas that provide society what it wants, but doesn't know what it wants? Can you think about scaling your ideas, right? Like if you truly, there's a difference between having money, being rich, and having wealth, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes people think wealth is a bad thing. I don't think wealth is a potentially a bad thing. I think wealth can be a driver to change and improve society. And it goes back to a doctor uses a knife to help save a patient's life. It's the same way someone who has capital and someone who has wealth uses it to completely change lives. And right. And, someone who I admire and look up to is someone like Elon Musk. Right. And think about the risk that he has taken and what he's done with his wealth and with his capital. Right.
Yeah.
Think about the environmental impact Tesla had on right, not just screaming about climate change, but actually changing the entire industry, right? Like he's completely pushed that industry forward.
Yeah.
He's given us a product that's way better than any, we call them ICE, right? Internal combustion engine cars.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's faster, it's sleeker. I mean, the tech in there is amazing, right? I mean, it's just, he's completely changed that paradigm. And he's done that through the use of capital and taking those risks, right? And thinking that no matter what anyone says, right, he had those technical capabilities to see sort of down the line of what's going to happen and how to execute that.
Right. Thank you so much for that advice. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that Andrew and I, we love talking about, and especially hearing real people in the real world actually applying and using. So we're really grateful for you.
It was truly a pleasure speaking to the both of you. And yeah, anytime I'm here if you want to pick my brain or you want to talk about something, more than happy to speak.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that offer.
Well, we'll let you get back to your day now. Thanks again for joining us, and I hope you have a great afternoon.
Right, people, resilience, all things that taking that step.
Exactly.
All stuff that we talk about. So it ended up being really good, and we did have like 30 minutes or so of being able to ask questions pertaining to his field, and you did a nice job bringing it back home. So
for sure. I mean, that was seriously incredible. We got so much value. I mean, it's like if we were to update our logo, we could put Mr. Davé's face on our channel.
Yeah.
And joking aside from that, like the whole story of being a first-gen American,
right,
and then not even going to college first, out of high school, being a video game developer for that kind of a salary, then pioneering admissions in college.
Yeah,
I mean, what he's doing.
He didn't even like explicitly say it, but basically he created the first online application for Rutgers University by himself.
Yeah.
In a time when that was not normal. Like people didn't have online applications. And he's
Exactly.
22, you know,
Yeah.
who would have been graduating from college and had never graduated from college at that point.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
It goes to show what grit and passion can do. And he was like Mr. Smith, very authentic, and I certainly appreciated his wisdom and just being upfront with us. And I like how because there is certainly, the argument to be like had that technology is moving too fast, but the way he views it and he expressed on the podcast was there's so much potential in it, and it can lift people up out of, whether that's poverty or whatever. He talks about wealth.
Exactly.
And that was a perspective I enjoyed hearing from somebody who does, understand emerging technology to the extent that he does. I mean, he's really,
definitely.
He's still young.
And he's young, exactly. Which is, I mean, seriously, like just as he was saying that, we're doing our great stuff, kudos really goes to him for everything that he's done.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Repeating.
So also, I mean, there was so much to unpack. So how about like we can do a little bit of like a recap of the points that we really enjoyed. And before that, just keep going with that. I loved how he said that, when he was 9 or 10 or something, he had like a computer that was the size of his desk.
I know. Yeah.
And it was crazy hearing that. And especially how, he said that he was like the black sheep of the family, and he had a lot of time to kind of explore the world on his own.
Right.
And it was amazing to see how he ventured into the virtual world, got to see how he could create it, how he could explore himself through that. And by overcoming those obstacles, he was able to overcome the obstacles in his real life.
Well, I mean,
was beautiful.
I mean, that goes back to like the whole idea of, creating what some might see as a negative experience. Again, being the youngest, he said his siblings were much older, so he was kind of left to his own devices, and transforming that into a gift. I mean, like you see, not only a gift for himself, but a gift for other people too. I mean, how much good he's doing at Columbia right now, but also for the world around him, especially in education. I mean, he talked about how, people who are becoming surgeons can practice now, or that technology is starting to come out where they can practice actually doing surgeries. I mean, what does that mean for us as just humans in general, and just completely reshaping the education industry?
For sure, man. This was really good. I mean, we could even ask Mr. Davé to come back for round two.
I was bummed. I mean, he certainly had a lot of useful stuff, and it could have kept going. I mean, we're so lucky that we even got an hour and a half or so with him in the middle of his day on a Friday. So thanks to him for that, and making the time for us and helping us further, our goals here. So
exactly. Yeah. So how about this? Let's do like not like a recap, but also a recap of our favorite moments of the podcast episode.
Sure.
So you wanna take it off?
I mean, I think that, and I had mentioned it, but just he talked about it. Mr. Smith talked about this idea of seizing opportunity, and towards the end, he really drove that home. It's like you're young enough to fail right now, and again, we talked about taking the first step, and not worrying too much about where you're going to land, just taking that leap. And sure enough, you will land somewhere. And so, taking calculated risk is probably the one that I took away, and he embodies that. Somebody who did that and was kind of fearless in doing so, and knew what he liked, and he stuck with it. I think some people try to do too much, and we're still young. And I think one thing I took away was, find something that you really enjoy and stick to doing that. Doesn't mean you can't enjoy other things, but really make that what you want to do, and try to become an expert in it, like he is with emerging technologies.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that whole point, like, what you were talking about, what he was talking about, seriously goes to show that, it is a completely possible thing to do in the real world. It's not just kids or us podcasters talking about it, in the air theoretically.
Yeah.
You can go out and start music, or learn how to trade like I did, or go practice football and lacrosse, become a high school star at it.
Well, no, I
feasible.
but you're right. I mean, it's tangible. It's certainly a tangible thing if you want it. I mean, he talked about when he was working at the Gap and how there's a bookstore across, and this is him when he's probably, I think he's 18.
Our age.
Graduated from high school. He's not going to college. Most of his friends are.
Yeah.
And, just reading. Like, it's out there, and he understood that, and he was determined. And, I mean, he ended up working for a gaming company when he was, 18 as a junior coach, 19. And that's really a remarkable thing.
Absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah, man. Well, I had a lot of fun with this one. This was exciting.
It was really awesome.
We got two great guests in a row. And so shout out to them for joining us.
Absolutely.
Take us home then?
We owe them a real debt of gratitude for everything that they did.
For sure.
All right, man. So for that, we had episode 4 with Mr. Parixit Davé, the Director of Emerging Tech at Columbia University. We owe you big time. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
All right, skadoosh.
Interviewer guy, I think he's hilarious. But no, I mean, they have to keep their body within a certain weight.
Yeah.
They can't be too light or too heavy, and they actually weigh them after the races. But
yeah, and just he was talking about just having all that core strength, right? Because I mean, think about how many G's they're pulling.
Yeah,
when they're going into, like he was saying, like the race car is it's like on rails, right? There's so much grip and it's turning, like you're experiencing so many G's. So just thinking about keeping your core, your body straight, right, as you're sort of going through those turns is mind-boggling.
Yeah, that was F1. But Samir, do you want to kind of lead the way here? Transition into round 2. Thank you so much, Mr. Davé, for rejoining us.
Yeah, it's so nice that you got to come back and, we can have some more fun together, talk a little bit.
Yeah, my Friday was crazy. I had back-to-backs, and I, only had that time because I had a meeting at 4. So, I mean, there's some other areas that maybe we could do deeper dives into. So
let's do it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
So, I mean, I remember that you talked on so much how literally your whole life is about transcending reality. So, I mean, when we were talking towards the end, you said that you had a lot of things that you wanted to come back and talk about. So where do you feel would be a good place that you want to, just resume the conversation with us?
Yeah, one of the points I wanted to make, and Andrew, you had asked this question about how do you keep up? The tech is moving at such a rapid pace, right? How do you keep up? And one of the things I said was I'm plugged into a lot of sort of the Twitter community and some of the other social networks, and I'm reading a lot, but I'm also doing projects, right? So you actually have to build something and get your hands sort of roll up your sleeves and still be involved. And what I have, and just to go back, I have 2 kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And so I love doing projects with them. So we just did something which is much like a 3D printed Tesla, right? So there's this project called OpenBot. It's actually, if you go to openbot.org, you can check it out. And it was actually started up by a bunch of researchers from Intel who are creating sort of this self-driving 3D printed car, right? So they have all the schematics of the internal electronics. They have the layout of how you can 3D print the body of the car. And it runs on a commodity Android phone, right? And they have a neural network that they built out, and you train this car that you build, let's say around your living room or kitchen. Sure. And so it could follow you, it could drive around and avoid obstacles. You have the camera from the phone, and you also have these 2 ultrasonic sensors for depth, for gauging how far distances are, right? And so if you sort of extrapolate that project and you think about what a Tesla is doing, it's basically the same thing, right? So Tesla has something called autopilot, right? And it has 8 or 9 cameras. and then it has ultrasonic sensors around the car, right? And what it's doing a couple of things. It's got computer vision, right? So it's doing object detection. So as you're driving, or as the car is driving, it's noticing pedestrians, it's noticing other cars, it's noticing curbs, it's noticing lane markings, right? And then it's also noticing signs, right? And then that's great. It notices that. But what computer vision does, and this is where we're going into like more of the theory, right? One aspect is, yes, a computer can notice and observe the world, right? But it doesn't know what it is, right? So it may see people and it may see a dog. Okay, it can put bounding boxes, meaning it recognizes that these objects are there.
Right.
But it has no idea what a dog is, or what a human is, or what another car is, right? And so this is now where neural networks and machine learning comes into play. So people are like, oh, what is all this stuff, right? Put it simply, all you're doing is you're training this machine learning model. And let's take a simple example of a dog. There's hundreds of types of dogs, but let's say you want to you have a camera and you want to identify a Chihuahua.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So you are basically feeding this neural network thousands of images of a Chihuahua, right? And so on the first pass, yeah, it's not going to know what a Chihuahua is, but then
Right.
it starts to and it's a lot of math actually, because a neural network is basically a mathematical representation of anything, of an object or something, right? And so if you are feeding it thousands, hundreds of thousands of millions of pictures, it starts to recognize and it starts to understand the characteristics of a Chihuahua, right? And then it will start to know, okay, this is a Chihuahua, this is a banana, this is a Chihuahua, this is a Doberman. It's a dog, but it's not a Chihuahua, right?
Right.
And so that's how basically computers are learning. When they say machine learning, when they say like neural networks, right? It's basically giving itself a confidence score or a confidence rating.
Okay.
And actually, you do have humans involved, right? They are saying, yes, they're labeling things. So they're saying these 4 items are Chihuahuas and these 5 are not, right? So in that way, the computer is starting to understand what a Chihuahua is. So if you look at the sensors and sort of the internal mechanisms of Tesla's autopilot system, it's basically doing the same thing. And then all it has to do is, right, it's all inputs and outputs. Once it starts understanding what's on the road, and I'm really simplifying it, but then you could potentially teach a computer how to drive a car, because all you have are your acceleration inputs, your brake inputs, and your steering inputs, right? And as the computer starts to understand how to drive, right, all it's doing is it's a combination of exploiting those inputs, right? So if it sees a stop sign, it knows that, okay, I have to ease off of the accelerator,
Right.
and I have to start applying the brake, or it's an electric car, so it has regen braking, right? So I have to just let go of the accelerator, and it knows the distance, right? How many feet per second, it needs to slow down gracefully, right? And it can't go to an abrupt stop, because human passengers are gonna not enjoy that, right? So it's a lot of math and calculating that it's doing, but really that's all it is, right? It seems kind of crazy and it seems very difficult, but if you think about it, there's now more than 1 million Teslas on the road, and they're all running. Even if you don't have autopilot on, they're running in what's called shadow mode, right? So as I'm driving, the car is actually running its own neural network or machine learning on the side, thinking, okay, the driver is doing this. If I was driving, would I also be doing the same thing? So there's this other component that's actually running the same time that you're driving.
Wow.
but it's not, so if you have autopilot off, it's still working like autopilot would be on, and then it's comparing the differences. So that's how it's learning about how humans drive as well. I mean, it's actually kind of brilliant the way Tesla's doing it.
And I heard that Tesla has you update your car when you have a Tesla.
Oh, yes.
You'll find out when, like, it's like a phone update, like you have to
Yes.
update it. And I was watching an interview with Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, and he was talking about how they process, like you were saying, information from all of the cars with drivers driving them, and that goes into the update. So you're having millions of drivers and driving and hours of driving experience that are being funneled into this one update. So each update is actually the information that the car is taking from thousands of hours of driving experience.
Correct. You're absolutely right. And so there's something called OTA, or over-the-air updates, right? So your Tesla is actually improving in time because the car it's built off of software, right? And so if it needs to update, it's just like your phone, like you said, you get an update and you get a notification on your phone that, hey, there's an update, and the car installs the update. But there's also this notion of software 2.0, right? So like, what is software 2.0? So what software 1.0 is humans writing software and programming, right? What software 2.0 is machines and computers writing software. And so it's learning, and then it's generating some code or an action that doesn't require a human to be present, right? And so we're always thinking, oh, AI is going to take over these industries. I'm like, yeah, AI is also impacting the developers as well, because now you can have machines write software based on data and based on neural networks, right? Which was not a thing because those things were compute intensive. And so that's the other thing. Now you have the power of the cloud, right? So 20, 30, 50 years ago, you had to build individual specialized infrastructure to do what you wanted to do. So let's say you wanted to build your own website, right? You had to go out, you had to procure, meaning buy physical hardware, stick it in a room, make sure you have enough cooling, you have enough power, right? And then you have to secure that infrastructure, you have to install the software on it, you have to gauge the requirements of, okay, how many people I think are going to be using this, and then you have to make sure you have enough resources on that box to meet the demands, right? Now you can simply go to AWS, like Amazon Web Services, which is a cloud provider, or like GCP, which is Google's cloud platform, and say, okay, I want to build a website, and I think the first month I'll get 50,000 hits, right? And then so boom, a couple of clicks later, you have your infrastructure, you can start building on it, and then your website is live, like all in the matter of a couple of clicks.
Wow.
Right? And then you can scale that on the fly. So let's say you've done a great job of spreading the word about your website or about your podcast or whatever you're building. Right. And then instead of 50,000 hits, you're starting to see 100,000 hits. Well, this thing will scale on the fly, right? So now you need more processing power or more compute power. You need a bigger hard drive, right? You need a load balance, like you need a load balancer to balance all that load. All of that can be done on the fly without having to rebuild or take down and buy another physical machine.
And this was one of the issues you had run into when you were at Rutgers redesigning the website, right?
Exactly. So that application, that online contract application had crashed because we didn't gauge the amounts of traffic, right? We thought we were getting X number of traffic, but really the traffic was overbearing. And then we had to literally order the equipment, right? And that takes time. And then you have to build it, you have to configure it, you have to integrate it with your current environment or server that you have, and then you have to launch it, right? And so, but now all of this is, you can do it in a matter of seconds.
Interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
I want to ask, because I'm interested in the whole idea of like a self-driving car. Have you driven one of those cars, and like, would you trust them now to self-drive?
For the record, I have a Tesla.
Okay. All right.
And I'm also an investor in Tesla. So
Okay.
Something we share then.
yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, so whenever I'm driving, it's on autopilot. I trust it more than sometimes my own driving, right? Because if you think about it, it never gets tired. It has a 360-degree view. So think about you driving, and you have freaking ultrasonics busting out of your back, and you have a camera around you, right? We don't have that. So yeah, if I were to actually go back and quantify the amount of miles I have driven versus autopilot since I got that car, I want to say 90% of my driving has been on autopilot.
Wow.
I trust it.
So
completely.
when you're going to work in the morning, right? You just hop in there. Do you like touch it at all or anything, or does it just do its thing?
So
Like,
what's happening right now? If you don't touch it, it will nag you. So you have to keep like one hand on the steering wheel, right? And you have to be paying attention. Right now, it doesn't take turns. So if I had to make a left turn or a right turn or take an exit that's not on the highway, I would take over, right? And I would take that turn. Right now, a couple of early beta testers are testing the full self-driving beta, and that thing does everything. You basically say, take me to the mall, and it will come out of your driveway. It will go on whatever street or take whatever turns or whatever exits, and it will take you to the mall.
interesting.
No intervention.
And
like you still have to keep your hand on the wheel,
right.
but you just simply put in your destination, and it does everything else.
Wow. And the unique thing is they're pretty affordable considering the amount of technology in their cars. So, you know, I know right now one of the big issues that prevents people from buying a Tesla or a car similar to that is the idea that they don't have a charging station in their house. And I'm starting to see them more at gas stations and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But how soon do you think, you know, realistically, can we expect to start seeing charging stations built into, you know, all gas stations in houses? Because that does play a big piece in the affordability of the car.
You're absolutely right, right? So one of the main things is, okay, if I get a EV, where am I going to charge it, right? Do I have enough range to get me to my destination? So Tesla has its own supercharging network, and it's huge. I mean, they've got superchargers everywhere. The other and so here I'm putting on my investor hat, right? Why am I investing in Tesla? Well, Elon Musk was brilliant, and he said, people are going to need to charge on the road. I'm also going to build out a supercharger network. So there's a charging destination or a charging network there when you're traveling. And they've done a great job of putting it near like Panera Breads or Costco's or the mall, right? Where like people are going to stop.
Right.
And Teslas have great range, right? And so in 2012, when they released the Model S, which was like their first sedan, they had done this like Roadster in 2008, but in 2012 they released the Model S, and it had over 300 miles of range. Since 2020 of last year, no other car EV has come close to that 2012 Model S range. Think about that. Because you know they completely built that Model S from the ground up, right, around electrification and around something called BMS, or battery management software, right? People say, oh, but Tesla's just getting their cells, their batteries from, you know, Panasonic, right, or LG. Yeah, but there's software that they're writing so that those cells are more efficient, right? Like that whole BMS is a complete Tesla proprietary software that they've written, right? So like that's where people think, oh, can't GM just buy the same battery cells? And it's like, yeah, they can, but when it comes to software, like that's where the engineering, and that's where Tesla is just completely killing and crushing it in that space, right? Because they've just completely rethought what a car should be,
Right.
not just what an electric car should be.
It's fascinating.
Incredible. Yeah. So I mean, that whole philosophy of Elon Musk, that he's always improving something, always planning for ahead, 10 years down the line, and then improving for that, not just for 2 weeks down the road.
Right. Yeah.
It's
long-term thinking, right?
Yeah.
It's really having, like he even says this, right? Like I'm not an investor, entrepreneur. I'm an engineer first, right? Like he's got such a technical capability. And if you watch some, you know who Lex Friedman is?
Yeah, he's on Joe Rogan every once in a while.
Yeah, like he does amazing stuff, and like he's got a lot of smart people that have worked at Tesla or worked for Elon, and just the amount of technical knowledge that Elon has, and it can be about crazy thing. Like he does a lot of context switching. So like he's also co-founded SpaceX or founded SpaceX, right?
Right.
So he can not only get a broad knowledge of technical aspects, but he can take a specialized component of a rocket and go deep in that tech, right? And like that's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Where like
I
think like I have a good foundation. I have a broad foundation of like technology and computers, but like he's got a broad and specialized knowledge of so much more, and like it's amazing, right? And so you can see that in the products that he's building, right? So like if you ever get a chance, I would say go test drive a Tesla.
Okay.
Like what it like it's completely redefines what a car should be, right? Like so we have a Tesla Model X, right? And so I walk up to it and the door automatically opens, right? I sit down and I press the brake and the door automatically shuts, and then I just put it into drive and go. There's no power button. Like it's like why do you need a power button if your car is electric? It knows your key fob is in your pocket or your phone is near you, right? It will open the door. The Model X opens the door for you. If you do the Model 3 and Y, it just unlocks it because but you still have to open the door yourself.
Yeah.
But it knows you're near, right? And then you just go. So everything is also connected with the app as well, right? So you can heat your car in the morning, right? Like all from the app. You could, what else can you do from that app? You can see where like the charging locations are, right? You can schedule your battery to be fully charged by 9 a.m., right? Or before you go to work, right? Like all of that is integrated. When you get a software update, the app tells you and installs it for you, right? I mean, it's they completely rethought of what a car should be. And then the acceleration, you get in and you push down on that acceleration.
I've heard.
And that thing goes. Like I've given people whiplash in this Tesla, and it's a 6-seater SUV, right? And it's beating out like Porsches or any sports car. So I mean, that acceleration is amazing. Right?
And I've heard it's also it is the safest car on the road.
Yes.
Because there's no engine in the front, right?
Yes.
Which gives more.
Yeah, we have a frunk.
Yeah.
Frunk, yeah. And like the batteries on the bottom, right?
Yep.
That line it through.
Yep.
It's fascinating. How long does it take to charge?
So it depends. At a supercharger, if you are at let's say 5%, you can get to 80% in like 30 minutes.
And what's the equivalent of miles? What does 80% mean in miles?
That gives you well over 200 miles.
Okay.
Right? And so if you're going on road trips, there's actually a strategy of charging, right? You want to charge enough to get to your next supercharger. So let's say you're taking an 8-hour road trip, right? You're gonna have to stop and get food, take a bathroom break or whatever. So that's why the supercharger network stations are set up in places where that's available. But let's say you may only need to charge for 15 minutes to get you to the next supercharger destination. And there's an onboard computer that calculates all that out for you. So on road trips, let's say we're going to Montreal, we have to stop more than what the car needs because we have 2 little kids that get all cranky and want to stop every 2 hours, right? And so I may stop for 10 minutes, while my kids like taking a bathroom break or getting some
Right.
food,
Yeah.
and the car's done already. It's like,
Wow.
oh, and it has games on it, right? So like,
Yeah.
Heard
while I'm
about that.
supercharging, I could watch Netflix, I could watch YouTube, I can play games on on the car, which is quite amazing. Yeah, and like, who else is gonna build in a fart mode? So what
Right.
that is, it's like you could make seats like, or make the audio think like it's farting in a particular seat, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
only Elon would
Only
think of, like,
yeah, with the
bullshit like that, right?
yeah, exactly.
Like,
I mean,
no other CEO is gonna do that.
yeah. I mean, well, his whole idea with the Boring Company came from Spaceballs. That was
Yeah.
Oh,
and, I mean, and the
yeah, yeah,
flamethrower and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
I mean, like he
and so, and the ludicrous mode, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
it's
hey,
on the
we're going.
car.
They went plaid.
Yeah.
That's all from Spaceballs, right?
Right.
So like,
yeah.
That's a good thing, because he has like some substance and he has character.
Exactly.
And you can completely tell from the products that he's building, right? It's
Right.
not just like an empty suit CIO, right? That has like no personality at all.
Yeah.
And like, his products, like, they exhibit that, right? And like, it really shows.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, as somebody who's, interested in really helping revolutionize education in terms of, we talked about this on our last episode. Is it concerning, like we're talking about Tesla right now, at any point, does it become too, like, do you fear that people will become too lazy? Like, you look at technology and you see all that goes into it, and you've spent your life in that, and you can appreciate that. But as a consumer, I get a Tesla and I know really I just have to do less. Do you ever worry that we're just going to become too lazy?
Yeah, that crosses a lot of people's minds, right? But I also look back to history and think about, remember farmers and Luddites, right? When they were like, oh no, the machines are going to take over. Do you know the story about the farmers and the Luddites, right?
No,
So
I do not.
You can share that.
okay.
Yeah.
Samir, what did you say?
No, I was saying that. Yeah, please feel free to share that.
Okay, so what had happened was, when they started introducing machines to farmers, they were actually taken back, because they thought the machines would be replacing the farmers, right? And so these were really just, at that point, really simple machines, but farmers did a lot of the labor work, right? And so naturally, they were thinking that, oh my God, I'm going to be replaced, right? The machines are going to start doing the work. And there was a group called the Luddites who banded together, and like, they were destroying the machines, and they were really against this technology, because their livelihoods and how they earn and make a living was they were fearful that it was going to be lost to the machines. And but if you look at the flip side of that, think about that agriculture or the farming revolution that happened because of the machines, right? And so it's this, really, you have to play this delicate balance of like, okay, I can think of 100 good things about this tech, and yes, there's going to be ways where people think, oh, this is going to make people more lazier, or it's going to, the productivity of a society may get hampered because of this, right? But that's why we need smart people who aren't just technologists making these decisions and having a voice in this as well. And that's why I think, if you know the underpinnings of the tech, right, you are making better informed decisions as well.
Right.
Because it's not just magic or a black box anymore. You understand how it's working, and you understand what it means for a society to go down a certain path. And we, nowadays, like, you just can't think, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer and I don't have to worry about this, right? Like, technology is being so pervasive, and it's going to be such entrenched in it already is, right, in our lives, that we can't just think, oh, that's not my domain, right? I can't really think about it. But so, to answer your question, Andrew, should we be thinking about it? Absolutely, we should be thinking about it, right? And there should be more people that have a voice and that have a say of, okay, this is completely detrimental to the fabric of society. So it shouldn't just be people in one geographic location, Silicon Valley, making decisions, right?
Right.
Or it shouldn't just be one tech behemoth making decisions.
Yeah.
Like that's where I think governments should be getting smarter about this as well. And right, and that comes from people educating themselves and getting smarter, and at least knowing foundational skills, foundational sort of ideas of how this is all working, because then you have a voice, then you can say, okay, this is a slippery slope. But if you don't understand what's happening underneath or what's happening in the black box, who are you going to trust? Right, it's just going to be like magic to you. So how do you decipher one technology is good, the other is bad, when you don't have that background yourself? You can't just say, oh, I have an MBA, I'll make decisions. Yeah, it's not going to work like that, you know?
What piece of advice would you give to people? I mean, we're young, who might not necessarily have a tech background, but how do you even go about beginning to educate yourself on the immense amount of tech out there so that it doesn't necessarily control your life or all of your decisions without you knowing it?
So what I would recommend is, you don't have to minor or major in computer science, but I would say take a computer science class, right? Just to understand what is involved in writing an application and like deploying it to the world, right? Like, because that's what like you're doing in computer science, or if you're interested in the theory behind how computers work, right? Because everything is digital now. So this could actually even help you in your professional lives as well, right? Because let's say you have an idea, you're entrepreneurial and you have an idea. Okay, how are you going to get that idea off the ground? You need to build either a product or a service, right?
Right.
Your touch points are going to be some sort of tech that's going to help you, right? So let's say you and Samir start something, and let's say you want to hire developers or engineers or designers. If you have even just the foundation, you can speak their language. You know who is BSing you, who is not BSing you. You know who is good and who is not. You know the limits of the technology as well that you're building, right? It just gives you that confidence and know-how of, okay, here's what I want to do. You may not be able to do it alone, and you may need to hire some people. You may need to hire some freelancers, but at least you can make more sound judgments on your team that you're going to hire, the product you're going to build, the service you're going to offer, and how is it kick-ass and better than what's available right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that's going to be, I guarantee, this day and age through technology, because that's the world we're living in, and that's where your consumers are. And I don't care if you want to open up a new hotel chain or you want to make toilets. Like, tech is going to be involved.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah. Well, that's a great piece of advice.
It definitely is. And I mean, this talk of learning and growing between, Andrew, your question and everything that we've been talking about, Mr. Davé, has me thinking that what are the things that you do, whether it's a daily basis or like a weekly thing, that you do to learn and keep growing, whether it's in the tech field or in life in general?
Yeah. I carve out my day where I have, even if it's 30 minutes to an hour, to step away and learn something different. You have to, right? Like, Andrew, like, how do I keep up? And it just doesn't have to be about tech, right? And like, I also made the point of like, you want to be well-rounded.
Right.
So it could be, this is really flung it out there, but I still drive a car that I bought when I was 21.
Wow.
I still have it. I have a Tesla. We have a Tesla, but it's a 2001 Mazda Protege 5. But I want to run this thing to the ground. And I was like, okay, I started learning how to do my own like brake work on it, how to change my oil. Like, if something goes wrong, like I want to be able to fix it.
Yeah.
And so it's just having this learning-based mindset, right? Where no matter what it is, I want to figure out how to fix it myself first before
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, I need to call someone.
Right,
Or
right.
I can't do this. Or like we bought a house and I want to learn, how to fix the HVAC system if something were to go wrong. Or at least if something does go wrong, I can at least communicate to the people that will come and fix it what is happening.
Right.
Right. And so I always have this like learning mindset of if I don't know it now, I'm going to learn about it.
Yeah.
And to be
for
honest,
sure.
like it doesn't require, I mean, there's so much, we talked about this last time too, there's so much information out there and so many people who are willing to share what they know and what they learn as well, that you could learn anything. Like you don't have to like, oh, I have to get another degree or I have to get a certificate. Like
Right.
there's so much
Yeah.
good learning opportunities where you have to. So I carve out my day where I either read about something or I learn about something, but I get away and I make sure that I'm like my ideas and my views are challenged and I'm learning.
That's seriously awesome. You know, I mean, from even my own personal experience, and maybe Andrew from you as well, tools like Google, tools like even YouTube, I mean, there's a dichotomy between, going and watching PewDiePie, nothing wrong with him, by the way, or video games. But there's also that dichotomy of learning, of finding different perspectives and challenging our ideas, like Andrew, we talk about all the time.
Right.
So where would you start if you want to learn about the HVAC system or oiling your car?
So I'm actually glad you brought that up because that is a huge skill set. Like, how do you figure out what is misinformation, right? How do you figure out what is something that is obviously not true, right? And so I remember, I think my first or second semester, we had a class. It was like information retrieval or something, right? And so basically what we did is like we reverse engineers Google's page ranking system. And so, yeah, I'm going kind of deep into the tech, but it was, okay, how is Google doing semantic search and how are they ranking what you're searching into, right? And there is like an algorithm and there is a way that they're doing it. But what it also taught us was how do you decipher what something is true and what something is not, right? Because
Right.
you have to look at these things objectively. Just because you do a Google search or you read it on a blog post, okay, but there's a lot of there's a lot of FUD. We call it FUD: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right. So like you'll find actually you'll find a lot of this stuff on products, right? So since we're on the Tesla thing, I'll talk about Tesla. There was this article that was written that a hacker could hack into a Tesla within 90 seconds, and I was like, what? And so there was this point where like this was being spread everywhere. And so I read all of the articles. I read a Wired article, and it actually broke down what was needed to do this hack. And it was a researcher who like figured this out. And so he had bought one of the Tesla boards on eBay, right? And then he had to solder the board to this MCU, which is the media control unit. So I'm like, right there, that takes the population from, a simple hack to really specialized people that understand bytecode, like assembly language, right? He had to buy another Model X and put it close so he could connect to the network.
Yeah.
It was so
that eliminates
ridiculous.
A lot of people right there.
Right? It was so ridiculous. I'm like, this hack. And Tesla, the next day pushed out an over-the-air update, and so it was nowhere. You can't even do the hack. But not only like every other news report I read, it was like, easy 90-second Tesla hack that could unlock your car. But when you actually looked into what was required to do this hack, it was literally next to impossible.
Yeah.
But it's technically possible. Right? It's technically possible, but for the average person, they would have no idea how to do this hack. No idea.
Yeah.
It would be easier to just jack a normal car and wire that one.
And you're absolutely right. And what the Wired article was actually honest. They said there was a code in the key fob that was allowing like this hacked board to connect when you program that board, right? But they were saying that this could also happen in another car as well. It wasn't just Tesla, but
Yeah.
Tesla got put through the ringer because Tesla is the new hot company
Like the
that's
black
coming.
sheep.
Yeah, it's like they were the black sheep of the day, I guess,
Yeah.
But like Forbes had an article on it, but actually when you look at the hack and you think about like who could actually do this, you have a really specialized subset of the population that could do this, and they could probably even afford the Tesla, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So like it was so that's what FUD is. It's like they're like, and I'm not saying everything could be FUD, right? There's a lot of things where, yeah, like you should watch out and not trust everything that's on the internet as well. But so you need to have this mindset of like, okay, what is real? What is misinformation? What is just propaganda, right? And that is a learning process, and that
Right.
takes a lot of critical thinking as well.
For sure. I mean, that goes to show, like, just last month in January, the beginning, when everything was happening in Washington, all the craziness, and there were a lot of people criticizing the social media groups and everything that controls information, that, hey, this is like censorship. But beside the politics,
Yeah,
it's fascinating how much control companies like Twitter, Google, and even like CNN, those sorts of media outlets have
yeah,
on taking what's actually happening and giving it to us, and how there is like a gap between the biases, the different perspectives, and then the
yeah.
truth.
Yeah, that's why I actually like being on. Like, I wasn't a big Twitter user, but I actually like being on Twitter because I follow a lot of different people that have different voices, right? And so it allows you to get different perspectives on the world, right? So I mean, and if you think about it, right, before social media, where were most of the people getting their information? Right, from TV, right, from those large networks, right? They were
Yeah.
getting their information, but now you have access to so much more, not only different sources but different types of information from different people, and so once again it's also could be a lot of information overload, because how do you decipher what is the truth versus what is spin or what is biased,
Right.
or what's the agenda from this person tweeting about this, right? And so I think about all of that, right, when I'm reading something. Okay, like, what is the agenda, like who's the author, right? Does he have an ulterior motive, right?
Yeah.
Right, and then I use sort of I put my technical hat on, and I think, okay, what is like the ground truth of this?
Sure. Awesome.
That's really fascinating how you employ that sort of a mindset.
I wanted to ask you, because we talk a lot about leadership between Samir and myself, but what is your leadership style in terms of how are you interacting with the teams of people you're working with, and what are just a couple virtues off the top of your head? We're kind of putting you on the spot here, but
Yeah,
that you think all great leaders possess.
all great leaders possess how to empower their teams, right, for maximum efficiency, productivity, and critical thinking. So all groups of people are, or corporations are, right, are groups of people inside those businesses or organizations, right? And so what leaders do, and the number one thing, are remove roadblocks that are there. And it may be bureaucratic roadblocks, and be political roadblocks, and maybe technical roadblocks, but as a leader, you have to identify what your goal is that the team needs to get to or accomplish. And then as a leader, what are the hurdles, the roadblocks that are there? And then how do you empower that team to get through the other side?
It's awesome.
Right. And you want to make sure, like, I am not a micromanager, right? I'm not the type of person that says, okay, you need to do ABC, XYZ today. you need to do blah, 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 right? So you set goals along the way, and then you have these check-ins where you're like, okay, how are we doing, right? Where are we at? What are some of the roadblocks? How do we need to improve? What do we need to do? And you have this feedback loop that you constantly run. And so there's something called like Scrum. It's the way to. Are you familiar with that? Scrum?
No.
Anyone?
Scrum,
Okay.
no.
So I'll take it from my world where let's say we're pushing out a product or we're
Sure.
developing something, right? And so Scrum is basically like a project management technique
Okay.
that you could use. So like let's say every 2 weeks the team needs to push out XYZ features of a product, right? And so you break it down to, okay, here's what the design team needs to be doing. Here's what the marketing team needs to be doing, right? Here's what your development team needs to be doing. And then they're off doing what they need to do. And then you have these quick, like 15-minute check-ins with all of them. And so how are we on line item ABC or XYZ, right? And okay, are we good? Are we on track? Move on to the next one, right? And so this is a way for the team to feel that they can always come to me, and we have these check-ins, but that I'm not overbearing them, right? I'm not saying, hey, Andrew, what are you doing over there? You know, like I'm not hovering on your back, because nobody wants that. No one wants to feel like they're controlled or they have no say. And just because I have the director title, right? It essentially doesn't mean anything except, okay, I have to make sure that this product or this service gets released on this certain time, and I have this whole stakeholder management. I have to make sure that if we say, okay, we'll give you, we're going to release XYZ on this date, my stakeholders are expecting that, right? And so I manage that relationship, right? And then I also have a team that I have to make sure is empowered and is working like a well-oiled machine, right? So that's all my title affords me, right? Like, I mean, to be honest, it's like it's a lot of just like coordinating work and making sure expectations are set, right? But I really don't have the power to come down and say, hey, this is like completely off base, or like your idea is so shitty. Like I would never do that, right?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I do give candid feedback to my team, but then we have the expectations of, we talk it out, right? So if somebody feels that this is the direction or strategy we should be going with, I am an open mind, open idea policy, but you got to defend it, right?
Yeah.
So if you just say, oh, because I feel this way, or just because I think, that's not good enough on my team, right? Like, yeah.
And I'm curious too, in like, do you have brainstorming sessions with your team?
Yes, all the time.
And so
we have the design sessions, design reviews. Yep.
I'm curious to hear, because I've had experiences where I go into a brainstorming session, whether I'm the leader or there's somebody else leading it, and we seem to be running in circles. And there's this technique that they actually use in improv called yes and Samir and I talk about this sometimes. But do you ever employ that when you're having brainstorming sessions where you build off of each other? What's the best way to just to build off of others' ideas in a brainstorming session?
So the way we do it, the first thing is, no ideas should be thrown away.
Okay.
Right. So like we basically have a wall, and we have stickies. Right. Well, right now it's virtual, right? We're using something called the Kanban method.
Okay.
I would Google that if you guys are interested, but it's a really good way to get some ideas and brainstorm. But everyone writes down their ideas. They get stuck to the wall. On the other side is the objective or the goals or where you want to be.
Okay.
Right. And so that's your like, okay, we have an objective. If you don't have an objective, I would say start from there. Yeah. What are we? Okay, we're having a brainstorming session, but why? Question that. Why are we getting together? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to build something? Are we trying to improve something? Are we trying to create something that's brand new? Like, what is the objective? If you don't have a good enough objective, I'm like, don't set up a meeting.
Right.
If you don't have a good enough objective to meet, don't like why we're wasting our time. We should be doing work, right?
Definitely, yeah.
So once you guys have those objectives and those goals and those like this is what we want to do, in the beginning, let all of the ideas fly.
Sure.
Right. And then you start sort of getting down to the nuts and the bolts and sort of the weeds of, okay, let's start categorizing these ideas. Okay, is this idea trying to improve or helping us get to here? Right? No, not really. Okay, but this idea is. So you start moving them towards those objectives and those goals.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Wow.
It's interesting too, because this is a lot of what you're saying now was shared with our interview with Mr. Smith, but you're also a young guy. And so it's cool to hear, you share the same leadership style as him. But I'm curious, do you have a mentor when you were coming through the ranks? Again, you're still young now and you're certainly mentoring other people. But did you have like a specific mentor?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it was someone specific. I was very lucky to be around people who were super smart, like technically, but also very creative. Because I told you, like I've been in music and bands my whole life.
Right.
Like that's the other thing, right? I know Samir, you had mentioned you were into theater.
Yeah.
Like being in theater will beat a Toastmasters any day. People are like, oh, you should do Toastmasters so you can communicate and talk to people. Okay, there's a whole difference of like being on stage and commanding your audience and having that stage presence that a Toastmasters will probably never provide for you, right? And so when you're in bands, right, you like there's this whole like DIY or do it yourself notion of like, hey, we aren't gonna get a record label giving us all this money. We're gonna have to do our own marketing. We're gonna have to figure out how to record our own stuff. We're gonna figure out how to book our own shows, right? And so I've met these people who I've looked up to who are in different sort of capacities of doing these things.
Sure.
But in my work life, it wasn't always the director or the executive, and sometimes it was, but sometimes it was also my colleague who are like, hey, this guy is really smart, or this girl is really smart, and I want to know and I want to learn the knowledge that they have.
Right.
Sometimes when you start diving into internships or the work environment, you'll start to see even your colleagues who are smart. And it doesn't. What's great about that? It doesn't have to be this. They're a mentor and I'm just a mentee.
Sure.
Right? Like, hey, let's go to lunch. Let's talk about life. Let's like connect on different things. So I was lucky enough to have that mentor who was maybe a senior, but I also valued the relationships that were around me. That they were, maybe we were on the same path, right? But I also had people who were younger than me, and I liked guiding them as well, or just talking about learning and learning about, like if there's a certain situation or a question they had, like I always enjoyed like just giving back because like at the end of the day, like no amount of status or money or fame or whatever is going to help make you feel better or give you some sort of pride as much as like, hey, I can give back and I can teach somebody else.
Yeah, I bet that is very rewarding for you.
Yes, it's very rewarding.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's something that Andrew and I, we definitely talk about, and it's for sure like a cornerstone of what Transcend Reality is about. That, I mean, maybe we have a little bit of that agenda of creating quality content, but the whole point isn't just to get a big audience and then gloat about that. It's to get that big audience so that more people feel empowered to reach their dreams and their aspirations. So, I mean,
and you know what I would say? Seek those people out. And there's so many ways. So at Columbia, I'll give you the latest example. We started something called the Emerging Technologies Consortium, right?
Right.
And I had made a list of thought leaders that I wanted to invite, and it was simple. Like it was like social media stalking them, right? It was like going on their LinkedIn, like going on Twitter, tweeting at them, like trying to make connections to people that worked with them. Like I spent a lot of time trying to form these like contacts, but you have to just be relentless.
Yeah.
Right. You have to go down this rabbit hole of like, hey, we want to get, let's say, person X. Okay, what's his circle, right? Like, what does that look like? How can we sort of penetrate that, and how can we start a conversation at least?
Sure.
Yeah.
And so seek those people out. People always think like this door is gonna knock and this perfect person is gonna walk.
Yoda's gonna walk through the door.
Yeah. And be like, I will mentor you. Like,
yeah.
No, it's valuable advice in terms of seeking that person out.
Yep. And I would say, like, are you guys seniors, juniors?
Yeah.
Seniors, yeah.
Right. Try to get an internship for the summer. And the reason why I say that is like you will start to understand what it's like to be part of an organization, a team.
Right.
You'll start to see how people work, right? You'll start to see like what is valued at a unit, at a corporation, at an organization.
Yeah. Sure.
Even if it's 2 days a week or something. Even if it's not doing what you want to do, at least you get a sense of what it's like to work with a team that are completely different than what you are, and what it's like to contribute to something.
Yeah,
sure,
for sure.
Well, that certainly set you up well too early on when you were working as a junior coder.
Yeah,
at the video game company.
Yep.
Amazing. So, I definitely believe that you have a lot of valuable experience with your leadership experience, what you do there. But before we get to that, you made a really, really good point of, when you have meetings, when you have work, start with the why. And that's a cornerstone of what Andrew and I would talk about. So I want to ask you that, do you have a personal why, like a life mission? You could put it that way.
I can tell you it changes a lot.
Yeah.
It changes at different stages of my life, right? And so when I was younger, my whys were I was also into like skateboarding as well, right? I wanted to do this trick. Like this is when I was like 12, 13, or I wanted to learn this instrument, right?
Yeah.
Or I wanted to write this. I was into writing little video games as well, right? Like, so like if you look at your life, all of those like whys and missions are gonna change. When I got married, it was I want to spend my time with my wife. I want to go and travel with her, right?
Yeah.
I want to learn together. I want to do things together that I haven't done before, right? So like my sort of compass changes, right? My sort of the objectives or the goals change, right? So where I'm at now, my whys and my missions are different. Now I have 2 kids. Now I have this like time value function running in my head. How do I spend the most amount of time with my kid while still making an amount of money, while still feeling good about myself, while still being mentally sane, right? Like,
right.
Now I have all these different sort of goals and objectives that I run through my head, and I now I have a lot more people I think about as well. So, which is always, once again, it's a good thing, right? Change is good, and you want to make sure as you're going through life, you aren't so tunnel vision and you don't see the big picture, right? So it's always good to sort of take a step back, reassess, why am I doing this? And the great thing we do on my team at Columbia is we write one-pagers. So if you guys know what this is, right? Let's say you have a new idea. Let's say you want to start up a new business. Write up a one-pager. And it can be simple as, what are we trying to do? Who is doing it? What are the challenges, right? How can we get there? It has to be a one-pager. Don't go crazy.
Yeah.
And then write that one-pager, and then find if you can do it yourself, great. But if you can find people who are like excited about what you're doing, and and you can communicate that, and you guys are on the same wavelength, that's even better as
And
well.
I love that idea because
Definitely.
it's also a wonderful way to stay grounded. Because you mentioned
Yes.
there are days where it's like, maybe I don't necessarily want to. I don't. You feel like you're going. You have to go in. And you said you have less of those, and you said most days you wake up and you're excited about what you do. But on those off days, you can look at that paper and remind yourself really what it is you're doing. And so I think
Yes.
it's a very valuable,
Yes.
tangible thing that you have as
Yep.
well. So I love that idea.
And it's also you don't kill ideas, right? Because let's say if somebody comes to me and we all have inherent biases, right? I'm like, oh
Sure.
God, this idea is horrible. But I never say, yeah, we're not doing that.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, let's write up a one pager, and we have
How
a
can we make it
standard
work?
template, right? And they go back, they get their ideas down, and upon reading that one page, I'm like, wow, they really thought about this idea.
Yeah.
They really formulated it out. And even at the time where maybe they haven't thought about it, and I say, go write your one pager,
Yeah.
it makes them think. And I've had times where like, you know what? Yeah, this Parixit, this one pager, I was writing this, and this idea doesn't, really get us to our goal or
Sure.
provide any value or substance. And then they themselves are like, yeah, we shouldn't go down this route. I've had the opposite, whereas like my first initial feeling was like, yeah, this is a bad idea,
Yeah.
like this idea sucks. But I was like, wow, like this person has given it enough thought, and it's something that I didn't think about, and they've formulated a way of how we could execute it or what we need to do. And I've actually changed my mind about it, right? And like, that's a good thing. So could you imagine being a leader where you're like, no, we're not doing it. You follow on those first instincts of like, I'm not doing it, right? It's you completely killed a potential idea that could have been good.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
Very valuable.
So, like on that same notion of finding those sorts of ideas, you mentioned how when you're acting as a leader for your team, you like to inspire a little bit of autonomy amongst the people you work with. And that reminds me of Netflix in a way. So how do you make sure to balance that sort of independence and also that people just don't like dive off the rails and end up not being productive?
Yeah. So we have this 80-20 rule, right? So and it's actually not like Google does this, like, right, and you probably heard of it as well.
Yeah.
80% of your time should be on the core objectives, right? Goals that we have laid out for our team. The 20% of the time, feel free to do something completely different.
Right.
Right. And I feel like there should be a way that you're accountable and trackable. Right. So if your 20% of your 20% is growing and you're forgetting about your core objectives and your core responsibilities, that's not good. And that's when you and I are going to have a conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
But so I really feel that, 20% of your time, let yourself get out of this comfort zone and the zone of I am, let's say, a senior developer, or I am an accountant or whatever. Like, let yourself out of and see this different world that maybe you don't get a chance to explore.
Right.
But we also have to be productive, and we also have to produce, because look, I report to somebody, they report to somebody, that person reports to somebody, right? And if we're not producing, and if we're not being efficient, and if we're letting our customers down, or we are sort of getting loosey goosey, then the whole team is going to get hurt, right?
Right.
The product's going to fail, the service is going to fail, and that's not acceptable.
Yeah, and you mentioned Google, and you also say your goal as a leader is to empower the people around you to work in an autonomous way and give them that freedom. I think Google, they have like a day, I think a year, where they send people home and they have to come back with new ideas.
Yes.
And out of that, some stuff like Gmail was invented.
Yep. Oh yeah, you're absolutely right.
Transformative
Yep.
platforms from Google that come from those days where they just sent workers home. They're like, think of something new and bring it to me tomorrow.
Yes.
That's your only task for today.
Yeah. It's funny. We had I visited Google offices in New York City, and one of their sort of like what they tell employees or what to strive for is think of this notion of 10x, right? So let's say you are using email, right? Don't just think how we can make email a little better. Think how we can make email 10x better, right?
Right.
How can we completely change what email is, right? And make it 10 times better than what it is today, right? So the other important thing is the culture, right? Culture is like soaked in that stuff, right? So if you form a culture where your employees are bringing their best ideas and they feel like it's not a totalitarian regime that they're part of, but also like there's accountability and there's tracking baked in, like that culture is amazing to have.
Right.
And leaders should think about how to cultivate that culture. There's this really famous or popular saying, right? Culture eats strategy. You could have the best plans, right? And you may think like you can execute. If you don't have a culture that supports and is thriving, and your employees are feeling like, hey, like I want to be part of this, and they make it like their passionate mission, your strategy is going to go to shit.
Yeah.
Right? And I've seen it happen so many places.
Right.
Culture is everything. And you want to make sure and as a leader, that's one of the main roles you have, is building a culture that is empowering your team.
Right. Definitely. Awesome. Wow. I was just about to ask a question, but I forgot it. But that your whole little discussion on leadership and there we go, creating ideas. Yes. You talk about how a leader should work to cultivate ideas, and it doesn't matter if it's kind of garbage at the beginning or if it's brilliant at the beginning. It can become something and evolve something.
Yes.
So for the audience out there, and even for us, there are days when we approach our work or life and we feel motivated to do something and we just get results. But there are equally days when, we talk about this, Andrew mentioned it, when we're feeling a little bit down and it's tough to think of things. So how do you go about generating ideas and coming up with new thoughts?
This is kind of cliched, but like you probably heard this, right? Like some of my best ideas are in the shower. Right?
Yeah.
Like, honestly, like some of my best damn ideas are like I'm in the shower and I'm thinking, like I'm not. I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm in this like nice warm place, or I don't know. But like some of my best ideas I've come from like just taking a shower. So like and maybe it's like I'm away from my usual office setting, or now we're all home, but even office at my home. But and my mind just wanders. Oh, like I was always a daydreamer, right? Like do that, right? Like daydream. Like sometimes let yourself go somewhere else, and it allows your mind to take you out of that crummy situation, think about something else, and not always feel like, oh man, I have to sort of grind this out, right? Because you know what's going to happen, and it happened to me, you're going to get burnt out.
Yeah.
And burnout is a real thing, right? Like if you keep on thinking, I'm going to work through this, I'm just going to power through this, I'm just going to, no matter what, you're going to get burnt out. And then your passion for that, like whatever you were trying to do, is going to dwindle, right? Your just ability to even think logically is not going to be there, because your brain and your being doesn't want to do what you're doing.
Right.
For sure, for sure.
So yeah, it's just something to keep thinking about as well.
Yeah, I mean, no shame, by the way, in showers. I mean,
Yeah,
we literally bought like a little whiteboard for me because I'm just standing there. I'm like,
Yes.
oh, hey, that might be a good business in like 50
Yep.
years. So I just
Yep.
jot it down.
Yep.
So, I mean, yeah, I even carry around with me, I have it right here in my drawer, a literal little book, and I call it my idea book
Yep.
because, I mean, I can be taking a walk and I just see something. I'm like, oh, hey, that's something to consider.
Yep.
And
That's
goes
why I
to show
think
the
like
power of ideas.
yes, and that's why I think that that one pager idea that I'm employing is super important because it's quick, right? You don't have to go down this rabbit hole where you get stuck, right? It's enough. It's not just one line or two lines of an idea, but it's enough substance you need to think about to fill that one page, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be like, oh, here's a great idea, and that's it. You still have to put some thought into it, right?
Right.
But not
sure.
enough for like, oh, you're not getting into the nitty-gritty details where you start double and triple checking of like if this is even a great idea right before you even get started. So
Right.
that's why I like this one pager concept where like, okay, let's do a one pager. Give me a one pager on why you think we should be doing this, right? And so like we literally have the way I've organized like our team structure, like we have a folder, one pagers, and they're all categorized and out into like different teams that are part of my larger team. And I love even just going in there sometimes when I'm out of ideas, right? I mean, now it's like I have the luxury of having other people create ideas. And that's the other thing.
Yeah.
You want to have your team not just be to the grind and following a process, because they're not going to give you any ideas if they're just not in that culture, right?
Yeah.
So I can go through these folders and read these other one pagers, and something clicks in my head. So
Yeah.
that's why this all connects.
No, you certainly want to be inspired by the company you keep.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Really good point. Really good point. So, Mr. Davé, there's a question that Andrew and I love considering out for ourselves and also asking the people that who we come across, which is, thinking 30 years down the line, 40 years down the line, and when you're looking back on your life, what would you consider to be a life well lived in your eyes?
A life well lived in my eyes is whenever I learn something, am I applying it, right? Am I helping someone else with it? Am I leaving? And like, this is really cliche too, but yeah, like I think about this. Am I leaving a better planet, a better legacy for
absolutely
society, for my kids? Like, and once again, like, now I start to think about these things more as I'm getting older, because now I have a family, right? And so, I want to think about, am I putting effort into something that gets me excited to wake up and have more good days than bad days? Am I making decisions that are going to have a positive impact on my team, on the people that are going to be using the products and services that we're creating?
Yeah.
Right? Am I learning every day? Right? I want to make sure like I'm not stuck in this bubble where the next 5 to 10 years I'm irrelevant. Right?
Yeah.
And then I'm phased out, right? Like what? And I always think about that. Like, what is my value on my team, or where I'm working? Like, what's the value that I bring to it?
Mm-hmm.
And if and I can't be complacent. Like most people get as they age and they get older, they get comfy, and they have a way of thinking or a way of thought that they think is the best. And like the world changes, right? Like one thing that's constant is change.
Sure.
And so I always want to have this mindset, and it's more of like a learner's or growth mindset, that I'm always learning something, keeping myself not get complacent.
Yeah.
It's awesome. And that certainly goes back to your whole point about leaving an impact and helping others goes back to the advice you gave us just a couple days ago on generating wealth and differentiating really the difference between that and just becoming really rich for yourself.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
that's true wealth in my
Yeah.
in my eyes.
Right. So this was thank you so much for coming back and joining us so shortly after. We know you're really busy.
Yeah, no, I mean, we talked a lot. We got some really awesome stuff extracted out for all of our benefit.
Yes, this was.
Yeah, I hope you folks, in your personal, professional lives, hopefully could apply some of this stuff. It's really helped me out as well.
Well, we really appreciate this, and we're sure all those who are fortunate enough to listen to it will as well. So thank you so much again.
No worries. All right, thank you, and
have a great one.
You too. Take care.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Stay healthy.
Yep.
Oh man, that was awesome. That was seriously great stuff. Again.
Yeah, I know, dude. I'm excited every time just by talking to him. He's so smart too, and he's able to simplify what it is he does and explain that to us, which is something I really appreciated. Somebody who emerging technology is not a simple thing; it's very complex, and he is able to bring it down to our level and have a conversation with us. And I really appreciated just his authenticity and him being so genuine and kind. One for joining us and sharing, what was it, like I think 2 hours and 30 minutes of his time with us
at least.
And just all great stuff. We weren't running in circles at any point in there. He was just continuously giving us great new advice, and I certainly will take that with me. I was just writing stuff down here, this the 80-20 rule, all these different rules that you can apply, the one pager as a leader. He talked about developing culture, and so as somebody who aspires to be a leader of whoever it is that I found myself working with, I really appreciated his advice, and I can't thank him enough for that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, Mr. Davé, he gave so much from leadership to his personal life, talking about, his work with cultivating good family life, cultivating a good lifestyle, how he finds meaning in the world. So this was definitely all about meaningful ideas.
Yeah, I loved it. And just the idea of even the brainstorming session part of the podcast, where we talked about you're working in emerging technologies that's moving really fast, so they're constantly brainstorming. How do you pull together as a group and really generate impactful ideas, right? You talked about the 10x rule, and you even mentioned it with Elon too. He's not creating solutions for just today. He's thinking so far down the road and completely re-engineering, how to look at certain things. And I think certain people have a gift, but it's also something that can be learned. And so I really enjoyed listening to him, as it helped me to start to think like that and to find ways to start to think like that.
Definitely, man. So you know what? How about this? We're young guys, but we still have good ideas. Because as he was saying, 500 years ago, the only way you could ever learn was to find somebody who was like a scientist or somebody who did research, and then you could learn. But today, you don't need to hunt down professors or anything. Pull out your phone, pull out your computer, and boom, we have some. Before we go on to the next point, there was a crazy fact that the computers used in Apollo 11.
The calculator fact?
I know. What's that?
Well, wasn't it that there's more technology in our calculator today than there was on, I don't know. This is probably incorrect, so little disclaimer, I'm not sure. But your TI-84 that you use in math class, apparently that has more technology in it than potentially one of the first rockets. Again, I don't know. So maybe it's not right. Don't quote me on it, but you could look it up.
yeah, exactly. So what I was about to get at was something a little different.
Sorry, Samir.
No, it's all good, man.
It's notorious for cutting you off.
It's okay. It adds for a little laugh. So the iPhones that you and I carry are advanced, obviously, and then we look at one of those Saturn V rockets from the Apollo program, there was science that proved that iPhones from like the early 2010s were astronomically more powerful than what was used to go to the moon.
Yeah, so that's what it was. It was iPhones, not calculators. But
that's okay, man.
Advanced calculators, so I would like to think I wasn't too far off.
I'm sure Elon Musk can make something like that.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So I don't know how we even got to this little tangent, but what I was gonna say is that we have good ideas because the world is literally accessible through phones and computers for us and for everybody. So how about we take this some time to talk about what our thoughts on everything that Mr. Davé mentioned, and then we can do a recap on some of the ideas that touched us the most from him.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, Samir, I really liked some of the experience that he was able to give us about leadership, and how to implement that in developing cultures. I appreciated some of the stuff that he was giving us, and he was pulling that from, it's not just something that he uses at Columbia. I mean, it's stuff that they use at Google and Tesla, and what it means to think divergently, as Mr. Ide says, right? Think outside of the box.
Our English teacher, by the way.
Yes.
Phenomenal man.
Yes, he is. But to really think in a different way that inspires actual change, right? And not just get through day to day. And also liked one thing. This is a little bit different, but when you ask him about what's your why, and he said it changes, and Mr. Smith said the same thing. It's changing, and so I think that some people, until recently, I thought that you were supposed to have one why, I guess you would say. And that's it. And then, that's your whole life. And I think listening to them talk about how their whys are constantly changing. I mean, Mr. Davé talked about when he was 12, it was about doing the next cool skateboarding trick. And then, he became a junior coder when he was 18. And, it's continuing.
Video games,
he got married. He has kids. And how all of that is still changing. And it doesn't have to be so definite. I mean, he said, change is a good thing. And I think it's important to look at it that way and not fret, change, but to welcome it and to evolve with that. That's what I took away. Yeah.
Beautiful points. And I'll build right off that, Andrew, of what you were just mentioning, what Mr. Davé had said about how change is like the ultimate constant from the moment we're born all the way to the end. And that's in fact actually a Stoic idea. And of course, it's not just Stoic, but all the world religions have it. All the world big thoughts have it. But something that is commonly touted is how it's a Stoic idea, and how they believed that no matter what happens, change will exist, whether it is a job or whether it's our physical growth from kids to adults. So, I mean, Andrew, there's this a Stoic idea called amor fati, which literally means to love your fate. And of course, that isn't referring to anything ridiculous.
Sure.
The atrocities in life or anything.
Yeah.
But let's take a math test at school or something like that. That we walk in the classroom, it's test day, and we're looking at it, we're like, oh, I'm gonna kill it.
Yeah.
This is my day. This is our day to win. And we come back, a week, 2 weeks later, and we get our test back, and we see like a C+.
Oh no.
and just as you said, we thought we were gonna kill it. It killed us.
It's killing me, man. Some of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No.
So, I feel like there's like a branch in terms of how we can respond to things.
Sure.
That either we can respond in our baser human way, or we can respond in a way that we actively employ these sorts of ways of life, like Stoicism, philosophy, world religions. And we respond in a way that, look, I messed up.
Right.
I don't know how yet, but I do believe I can talk to people. I can reflect introspectively and learn where I messed up. I can accept that fact. I can adapt for the next time. And hopefully, if I do things well, if you do things well, we can do better. We won't get that D+ next time.
Yeah, man. No, that's a great point.
Thank you, man. So I mean, that's pretty much like what amor fati is. And then we can again take another example that, like, let's say it's the weekend, and in a non-COVID world, we have family home, and we're all having fun, and we have
Sure.
these like big plans of going out. And right as we're getting our shoes on, we're getting ready to rumble, it starts pouring. So of course, I mean, there go all of our plans to go to the park or watch a movie or whatever. But it doesn't have to be the fact that we all, get by a fireplace and like we're grumbling to each other how our day is messed up. We can again accept that fact, adapt, and almost try to create a better day than if we had gone to watch that movie or go to a park. So anyway, that's what amor fati is, to cherish what happens because it can allow for more opportunities.
Yeah, and he talked about that in our first episode, Mr. Davé did with him, about learning how to pivot, and really seizing opportunity, and transforming what seemed like a really unfortunate occurrence into a gift.
Yep.
And that's certainly been the theme with him and Mr. Smith and their success. So it's something, and it's not hard to employ in our lives.
Exactly.
It's just about reframing. So
exactly, man. So might as well move forward with the smile.
we were going into the outro.
Yeah.
Froze, got the good thumbnail. Now, okay. So go ahead.
We're good.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, like, it was just so funny that I think we both froze for each other.
Okay.
So I was talking, and then I just see you like smiling. You're looking at me.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, man, if you're being the Kung Fu Panda right now, or if you're
no.
frozen.
You were frozen up on me too. So
yeah.
Anyway, it was
All
a great
good,
second episode. Transcend Reality podcast.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun, Samir.
This was seriously awesome. We got some awesome stuff, man. I'm looking forward to our next episode. Skadoosh. Let's do it.